Okay, good morning again. Welcome to our 10:30 a.m. panel on how to build an effective sports brand. Okay, we are just currently waiting for one of our panelists to rejoin us. Just had to run out in the hallway for a quick second here. This panel is being moderated by the great Dr. Katie Biddle. I will go ahead and turn it over to her.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to our second panel of the day. And this panel is about how to build an effective sports brand. And we are joined by three amazing panelists. We have Chris Peterson, Isabel Broughton, and Katie Kroll. Chris Peterson is the Vice President of Communications and Content for FC Cincinnati, and she just started this role in January, and before that, she worked at Penn State University for 20 years as the Associate Athletics Director for Strategic Communications. Katie Kroll is a professor at Northwestern. She is also on-air talent for Marquee Network, which we just talked about that network at the last panel if you were here. And she has a lot of experience in professional baseball, including being a development coach with the Boston Red Sox. And Isabel Broughton is the marketing director for RC Outfitters here in Peoria. And she is also overseeing marketing for the Steamboat Classic. So she's very invested in our community here in Peoria. So please welcome our panelists to the stage. So my first question is, what strategies do you use to create a consistent brand experience across platforms, in store, and at events? And Katie, you can go first if that's...
Definitely. Can everyone hear this? I was struggling with this mic earlier, or I'll just project. Okay, so I'll share an example because I know it's close to home for Katie as a huge Cubs fan. So in 2016, I helped plan the World Series Trophy Tour for the Chicago Cubs, which was this really seismic moment, right? So we had a lot of people who weren't in Cleveland for Game 7, but they wanted to be a part of this historic experience. And so we took the trophy all over the Midwest. We even took it to the Dominican Republic. There was one time when Bill Murray, for those who don't know, the Commissioner's Trophy in baseball, it has all these pennants and it's almost circular. So he flipped it over his head and pretended it was a cage, which was fun when we had to send it back to Tiffany's in New York in order to reconfigure the pennants. So you have this representation of the brand, right? And so when you're thinking about the different types of people who are interfacing with this trophy, it's a variety of generations, men and women, a host of different races. And so you're trying to think about how do we showcase the Chicago Cubs in this really powerful way because people have such a strong tether to the brand, right? Like you have people who are 89 years old standing in front of the trophy getting their Christmas card photo taken, and people who are 2 years old, right? Like someday they're gonna have that photo on their fridge and they said, oh wow, I was there for that moment, I was there for that experience. So from a branding perspective, it was this really cool manifestation of a historic moment that we could bring to our fan base.
Thank you. Isabel?
Yeah, to kind of like piggyback off of that, I think a big part in creating a consistent brand experience is understanding that consistency doesn't mean it's identical for everyone. It's the same feeling across different brands, and I see that in what I do in managing kind of different companies and their social media experience. It's just kind of making sure that that feeling that you're getting across different brands and in different areas of digital media, in-store events, some of our road races that we're putting on, like the Steamboat Classic, just making sure that everyone truly understands the foundation of all the businesses, which is really pouring into the Peoria community. And I think that that foundation and making sure that everything that we do in a brand experience always falls back on that foundation is kind of what helps keep everything consistent and just that same magical feeling throughout branding.
Yeah, I think brand voice and value is what has to be at the forefront, and like she said, to be consistent, I think is the biggest thing, because you want your fans to be able, whether it's looking at social media, being in venue, or whatever it is, you want them to be able to take that logo off and for me, say, oh, that's FC Cincinnati without even knowing it. So just being consistent with the way that you're presenting everything. We're ironically doing brand work right now, and where we're evaluating all of our brand. And I think the most important thing that goes along with that is understanding who you are and leaning into that. Like, we're not going to be LAFC, we're not going to be Miami. We are, at the end of the day, a mid-major or mid-market team that is a small community, so we need to lean into, we have 19,000 season ticket holders in a 25,000 seat stadium. So we need to lean into those people and people's love for Cincinnati and be able to grow our brand that way. When you look at successful brands across other other mid-market teams, we look at the Milwaukee Brewers and the Buffalo Bills and these different groups, and they all lean into who they are. They're not trying to be something that they're not. And so being able to grow your brand, understanding who you are, and when you go to do a piece of content, say, is that us and does that fit us? That's where you build your content. You can't go out and do something super flashy, and I'm not saying that we would never do anything flashy. We're a little bit more on the conservative side because that's what Cincinnati is. We're not going to be, LeBron James isn't going to be sitting at one of our games anytime soon, but he might be sitting in an LAFC game and doing something like that, or, being at a Dodgers game and all those kinds of things. So you really just need to compare yourself to, like brands. At the end of the day. And for us, that's where we are. We are developing some pillars that are going to be the things that we're going to look to as we create content and say, here's the 2, 3, 4 pillars. We haven't decided what those are yet. And if it doesn't check one of those boxes, then the question has to be asked, why are we doing it? And is it worth the investment of resources?
Thank you so much. And Katie, I can say that it was effective. My picture with the trophy is still my profile picture for Venmo.
I love it.
Yeah, you can find that there. I was the first person in line at Redbird Arena, by the way, to get in to see the trophy. So
You can find the clip online, I've been told.
yes, there is a clip of me from the that other school's student media of me saying some things about the Cubs winning the World Series. Yeah, I'll let you find that on your own. So my second question, what do you think are the biggest challenges that people in your roles are facing today, and how can you navigate those challenges in a way that stays authentic to your organization's brand?
I think it's super interesting. We live in a world where consumers, especially consumers your age, expect companies to take stances on social issues, right? Like when the Black Lives Matter movement really coalesced, you had companies like Sephora commenting on the importance of Black lives, which is objectively true, but it's just fascinating to me that a makeup company would feel the need to take that stance. And it's because they recognize that how you spend your discretionary income, you want to support entities that align with your values. So if Sephora didn't make a comment, or if they didn't present themselves in a manner that aligned with how you feel about how races should be respected, you might not patron Sephora anymore. So I think from a branding perspective, it's why entities like Disney have corporate social responsibility executives, right? There is a very concerted effort to identify these are our principles, and then when there are societal inflection points, this is how we're going to respond. Whereas the Milton Friedman economic principle of companies just exist to make money, and all you have to do is maximize shareholder value. I don't think people of our generation believe that anymore. We want businesses that aren't evil. We want businesses that are additive to society.
Yeah, going off of that, I think that another challenge in that someone in my position might face would be how crowded and fast-paced the marketing industry is at this point in time. I graduated in last May, and I had a whole senior capstone class all about consumer insight and trends. And during the time, I was also kind of working my job at RC Outfitters. So I was learning these things in a classroom, and then I was also doing it, when I'm onboarding my, soon-to-be professional job outside of the classroom. And one of the things that professor had told us was that the trends of consumer insights and what is current now isn't probably going to be current in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years. So I think that that's a big challenge that we as marketers are going to face, is understanding, what brand that we're working for, and that foundation, and being able to take that foundation and really understand, the challenge of, does this trend fit our branding? Does it fit what we're doing in the community? So when I think of RC Outfitters as a small business in the community, I think it's all about filtering. These are the big trends that some of our vendors that we carry, such as Hoka, we carry New Balance, and we're seeing these massive, worldwide brands do these different trends and these different, studies, and they're, sending us some of their information in it. And it takes us sitting down as a small business in Peoria and really understanding, what are those consumer insights? How do they, filter into what we're doing here? And how can we filter all of these trends and really make it about our brand, about the community, and make sure that it's based all in the foundation that we're building in Peoria?
From a content perspective, the social media world is so fast moving, and the resources that we have are limited. So it's being able to, in a perfect world, we would go out with whatever piece of content we have, and we would tailor it to our TikTok, our Instagram, our Facebook, our X, our LinkedIn, and we'd have 5 different versions of that, because we know that 5 different sets of people live on those spaces. I, at my age, am not on TikTok at all, period. I only see it when people send me TikToks. But I know that I get a lot of my stuff on X and Instagram, but I know my mom gets all her stuff on Facebook. So understanding, but we want everybody in all of those groups to come to an FC Cincinnati game and have brand affinity for FC Cincinnati. That's not possible in our world, because we have a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of time. So to be able to do 5 or 6 different pieces of content that are basically the same messaging would take an entire day. And we don't have that amount of time to only put out 1 piece of content a day. That's not gonna go, because, and in all reality, and I think Andy mentioned it in his piece, getting 4 people to read your post, I mean, obviously for sports groups it's a little bit higher, but that's a lot of time and effort to put in for something that's gonna last for 15 seconds. And so just being able to navigate that, and go back to what Isabel said a little bit too, how does that fit what our overall brand messaging is? That's really important. And I think the other piece that's very difficult for us to manage sometimes is whether it's a trend, or whether it's somebody says something to a leader in our department or in our organization, not having squirrel moments, or figuring out what those squirrel moments, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's we're working on this, oh my God, this is great over here, and then you are starting to work on this over here, but then you forgot about what was happening over here. But being able to navigate those and figuring out what's most important to us to be able to build our brand, and not just because one person said one thing to one of our leaders, now all of a sudden we're doing something that is going to impact 1 or 2 people versus impacting 1,000 people. And so just being able to navigate that, I think, is really hard sometimes, and it does take a little bit of a backbone to push back on leaders, or look at a trend that maybe is a trend that doesn't fit what we are, and saying, no, we're not going to do that trend, even though that's really cool. And just, so it takes a lot of effort and a lot of planning, and social media is not something that you can necessarily plan for, but being able to utilize the resources that we have to maximize the amount of content that we're putting out.
Thank you. And for this next one, we can have Isabel go first so that we don't make Katie go first every time. So a lot of people in the audience right now are about to graduate and go out and get jobs, and some of them are looking for jobs in your field. So what are the skills that you think are most important for them when it comes to jobs and brand management? And can you share a time in the past when you used those skills in a project you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so I was sitting in all of your seats 1 year ago, which is kind of fun for me to sit back now and see it from a different viewpoint. So I think that, I spent this last, year at my job really learning a lot of skills and soaking everything in that I was doing. So I think that answering this question is a little hard, but I'll try to not list too many skills. I think that storytelling is like the number one part of my brand. I think that learning what story it is that you're wanting to tell and being able to tell it efficiently is a really big part of any sort of content creation with social media. But then also being able to take that story and showcase it in a store at the Steamboat Classic on June 6th, at our run clubs, at different events. So I think storytelling is a really big skill, and it's important to brand management. I think staying consistent, I think it's really easy, kind of like what you were saying, to say, we have all these squirrel moments of, I'm really focused on this one project and this one story, and then in a snap of the fingers, it's really easy to get sidetracked and start going on this other path. But I think that when it comes to brand management, consistency is the number one way that people can really recognize what you're doing digitally, in person, at events, etc. I also think adaptability is like really big in everything that we're doing, being able to adapt to, changing circumstances, being able to, at the snap of a fingers when something changes, say, okay, let's pivot, let's, start focusing on this project or this idea and really pouring into that. I think a project that I've worked on that I'm very proud of is our run club. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with our store, but we are a running shoe store at our heart and at our base. So one thing that I noticed last June was that our run club was kind of, the branding behind it was lacking a little bit. We didn't really have a lot of, great social media going out there. The only messaging about our run club was really a Facebook group page. And as a young consumer, I really realized, I'm, as a consumer, really hesitant to join a Facebook group page. So I'm going to assume that many of my peers are as well. So I sat down with the owner of the company, and we really talked about what the run club could be, his vision for it, my vision for it, and we really strategized on everything. And using some of the skills like storytelling through our content, building off of what is RC at its heart and what is this run club going to really be about, what's the basis of it, what do we want to communicate with people, was a really big part in growing it to 10 to 20 people on any given Saturday that we host a run club to. Now we're almost nearing 80 to 100 every single week, and that's just in the last 6 months that we've really kicked off the rebranding of it. So I think that also consistency was a really big part in building this project. I think it's easy when there's a run club. There's so many different stories that can go into it. There's so many different types of content that you can do, and I really honed in on what is working, what's resonating with people, what's resonating on multiple platforms. So what kind of reels are resonating with younger consumers on Instagram, with maybe some of the older consumers or people that really like the history aspect of Peoria on Facebook, and really tailoring the content to really understand that and making it consistent. So when I find something that works, making sure that that is something that's going into our content on a regular basis, and then just adapting as we go. I think learning and listening to some of the members who come every single week to Run Club and listening to their ideas and being able to say, that's a great idea. I didn't even see that was something in building a brand that was so important to some of our consumers, and being able to adapt as we go and listen to everyone. So I think that overall, storytelling helped build the brand. It set a really strategic base for what we were doing. I think consistency continues to grow the brand in a really strong way, and make it really recognizable to anybody when they see a reel. Hey, that's the RC Athletic Club. That's a run club in Peoria. That's the run club in Peoria. And then adapting and listening to all of our members and hearing out what they have to say, and making changes when necessary.
I think as young professionals, being a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, especially if you're going into social media or content creation, being able to write shoot video, edit video, photography, whether it's, no one's saying you need to go out there and have a camera like the one in the back. You can use it on your phone, and you can find different ways to contribute. So being a Swiss Army knife is certainly, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. So you do want to have something that is like your master trade, but being able to go out, like for me, I came out of college and like social media wasn't a thing at all, but I was a writer by trade and a stat nerd and all of those kinds of things. And it's as I got to Penn State, social media began to pick up. We created social media accounts. I knew a little bit how to video edit because I was also a broadcast major. So then I made that skill better. I started shooting photography. I started doing all of these things that then made more doors open for me down the path. I think the other important pieces are being collaborative and being a good teammate, because you can't do, and I'll give my example here in a minute, but you can't do the things that we do from a content and brand perspective without being good teammates across the board and being able to collaborate with different departments, because no one lives in a silo. If you live in a silo, you're going to fail as a brand and as a group. So I think those are probably the two biggest skills. I would also say, and this has a little more to do with probably the generation of you all, is if there is criticism, you need to be able to take criticism, and you need to be able to not take it personally. It is just feedback, and it is constructive criticism that is helping you to get better for the next time. So if someone gives me a release and I red pen the heck out of it and give it back to them, doesn't mean that they did a bad job necessarily. That means that here are things that I need you to learn from this time so that the next time you can be more in our brand or our style guide or different things like that. But I can't have you be up in your feels about about what I'm saying back to you, just because of that. So the example that I would use that takes a lot of cross collaboration is, so every year MLS you get a new kit, and so we had a new kit this year called the Seven Hills kit. It required effort from everybody in the organization to be able to pull off an announcement, to have an understanding of. So the reason it's called the Seven Hills kit is that there are the 7 hills of Cincinnati. And so all of those hills were represented in this uniform top. And then we had orange shorts for like the second time ever or something like that. So understanding how important the 7 hills are to the city of Cincinnati, and being able to work with marketing to understand that, content creation to understand that, our graphic design group to understand that, our in-stadium people to understand that, so that we could communicate to our fan base that we are Cincinnati. We say all for Cincy is one of our taglines. Like, this is one way that we are saying we are all for Cincinnati. We understand that the 7 hills play a huge role in the history of Cincinnati, and we're all in on it. This is not a knock on the Bengals or the Reds. Like, they're not going out making a 7 Hills kit or jersey for their special games or anything like that. So this is our way to like tip our hat to the city of Cincinnati, and but we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page so that we can have the most successful launch that we can have. And we took our players out and we shot on the 7 hills around town, and we did different content pieces that went all along with it, and then we worked with our in-game presentation folks to make sure that we were representing the same things, and our retail people, so that we could go out and sell those jerseys so that we could make some money too off of them. So there are so many tentacles that I think when you're your age, and I say this too because I was the same way, I would have had no idea that this even was like a thing until I got to where I am. But everything you do impacts each of those tentacles. And everything that those tentacles do impact you. So being able to be open and work with other people is a huge skill to have.
I think Chris and Isabel shared some really thoughtful advice. I would also endorse being proactive, right? Like, we live in an era now where you can create a social media account. There's a woman who's now on MLB Network. A producer just sent me a clip of hers. She did an explainer on the infield fly rule. And he sent it to me because at Marquee, we're going to do something similar this year, like a baseball ABCs, where WOBA gets explained and ERA gets explained. And I looked this woman up, and she created an Instagram account called Baseball for Baddies, and it has 200,000 followers, and it's awesome. It's like super cool content, and I commend her because it's not like she's a former player. It's not like she's worked for a team before. She just has insights on the game that she shared. She built up this following. MLB wanted to appeal to a younger audience, so she's on MLB Network now every Saturday, right? She's not that much older than you guys. So whether it's going to Chiefs games and writing scouting reports because you want to work in baseball operations someday, or you want to be an athletic trainer, and so you go to the AD at Bradley and say, hey, I would love to work. I don't know if it's work study or if I do this for free, but I think proactively trying to find opportunities for yourself to build out your resume. You know, like I've had waitressing jobs. Katie and I were just talking about it. I've scooped ice cream, I've lifeguarded, but like when I was applying for jobs out of college, none of those things were on my resume, right? I had sport-specific experiences that I knew I could speak to in an interview, even if, honestly, like some of the most important life lessons I've learned are from waitressing and dealing with different types of humans. So that would be an additional portion of advice that I would say. Like, if you know what you want to do, create opportunities for yourself to develop skills that you can then speak to in an interview.
And I think to Katie's point, that athletic departments are historically understaffed, and there's always an opportunity. When I was at Penn State, we had 25 students that worked in the comms department alone. We had another 18 students that worked photography and video. We had another 7 students that were graphic design students. We had probably 30 kids that worked in marketing. They all either did it for credit, they got paid, it was volunteer, whatever it was, but it's all opportunities. And I think being a sponge and taking up any of those opportunities that you have, even if you're like, this is stupid that I'm handing out stats at halftime of the basketball game, like there is something to be learned in that, and to understand how a game operates. Not to like go off into a random tangent, but like I was at Penn State for 9 years doing women's basketball. I had an opportunity to move over to football and take over football. So going from women's basketball to football is a huge step. And then you add in a place like Penn State that had such a storied history. But when I took the football job, I had done every single job as the women's basketball SID in the Beaver Stadium press box. And on top of it, I took every opportunity to talk to our media that were covering the football team. So when I moved into football, it was a seamless transition, or as seamless as it could possibly be, because I knew what was happening in that press box, and I knew the people who I was going to be dealing with. So I could have sat there every Saturday and done the one task that I was given, and I could have just sat there and not talked to any of our media people, but I took the opportunity to take advantage of this thing that was presented to me, and that did a lot for me to be able to move on to the next level and then continue to move up the ladder after that.
Yep, that's awesome.
Thank you so much. Chris, I think it's your turn to start.
It's
the
like a
answers
reverse
as well.
snake.
Yes, yes, exactly. So we've talked a lot about how to bring new customers to a brand. I'm curious what strategies you think are best, or what strategies have you found to increase brand loyalty for customers that you already have?
So I think it got mentioned earlier, storytelling is the cornerstone to everything that we do. So one of the things when I got to FC Cincinnati in January that I instituted was what we call a story bank, where we go through, and whether it's video, photo, written, whatever it might be, it's a story about Nick Hagland, who's Mr. Cincinnati, or a story about this, that, or the other thing. You know, we have 2 brothers who are on our team, and the one brother cooks dinner all the time. And when I say brothers, they're like 17 and 18. Like, so it's not like they're like 34 and 35. They're young guys, so it's a lot for us. They came through our academy. So we went through and created all of this conversation. We talked about our academy, which is obviously U18 and under. And for us to be able to grow kind of that next generation of soccer player and that next generation of fan, what do we need to do to reach that? So then we started talking about, let's do more content for our academy versus what we've been doing in the past. I think one of the biggest things that we're going to start dealing with, so if you look at our channels right now, it's probably not quite as much as what I want it to be, is fan stories. everybody wants to feel connected to to a brand of some sort. And so if you have a fan story of you're going to somebody for their first FC Cincinnati game and you're just with them the whole day, and you go through Washington Park and they go through the pregame walk into the stadium, and they're sitting in their seats and they're having a great time and they're enjoying the Bailey, which is our supporter section, you're showing a great fan experience, but you're also making that fan feel really special, and you want to make that person feel special, equally as special, whether they're somebody who's a season ticket holder for all 10 years of our well, now 11th year of our organization, or whether it's somebody who's in the Bailey all of the time and is one of our most ardent supporters. Having, when you're not one of the big 3 sports leagues in America, you need to find a way, and I think Andy talked about it earlier, like you need to find a way to feel a genuine connection. And for us, like our players feeling accessible and kind of, I know they don't have masks on, but taking the mask off and making people feel really connected to our athletes, making people feel really connected to other fans. Like MLS is having a calendar change coming up, and so we were talking about different ways that we can explain that. And one of the things was, do we have other fans, like Bailey fans who really understand it, explain it to other fans? Is that a way that maybe we can get a different touch point and we can get people to understand? So I think that's the biggest way for us is storytelling, but not just doing it in one direction. It's hitting as many different ways and types of people, because we don't want our average age to go from 5 years, to 6 years. Down the road. We want it to be getting lower, because those folks are the people who are going to be there for the longevity of our organization. I think as you look at the calendar flip, I think is going to be huge for MLS to get onto the global calendar. And I think we were talking about it last night, just that opens the door for you to maybe have more signings like Messi and some of these other people, where if you can get out of being on Apple, or maybe you can draw more attention to Apple. Like right now, most American soccer fans end up watching, Premier League and the European leagues, and they're not watching MLS. And that's probably partially the schedule that MLS plays, which is opposite of the entire global market. It's partially because they're on Apple TV, and until this year, we're behind a double paywall, so no one was wanting to pay for Apple TV and a second platform. And I think, thirdly, there wasn't necessarily an investment from the owners of MLS teams, and I think all of those things are potentially going to change with this calendar flip. And so for us, those need to be the drum beats that we're putting out there to be able to improve our brand and improve our standing globally.
I'll cite something that John Hay, who's the senior vice president at the Red Sox, once told me. If we can get a fan 12 years old or younger, we have them for life. So the earlier panel mentioned the Toy Story broadcasts or the Big City Green NHL games. If you're 8 or 9 years old, in some ways, that's an inflection point for you as a fan, right? So if I choose hockey, if I choose to follow LeBron, I then will follow that team for life. And the reason why that's so unique and so special is think about how many other purchases you will make during your life across different brands, right? So if you buy peanut butter, you might buy Jif, you might buy Skippy, you might buy Peter Pan. If you buy toothpaste, you might buy Colgate, you might buy Crest, right? And you don't really care, right? All of those are interchangeable. Sports are not interchangeable. If I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, I'm not, if I go to Washington University in St. Louis for college, I'm not suddenly going to become a Cardinals fan, right? That would never happen. It's one of the reasons why in Florida, a lot of those markets, like the Marlins and the Rays, have had trouble developing or getting fans. Is if I'm a snowbird and I'm coming down from Boston and I was a Red Sox fan my whole life, I'm not suddenly now going to root for the Rays, right? So I think it's really powerful and really unique, and it's why everyone is scrounging for the younger demographic, because imagine if you could have a consumer for their entire life. The potential opportunities there are incredible. And it's true, these are not things, these are not, you talk about masks, we don't lose our fandom easily.
Yeah, I think kind of touching what both of you guys were talking about, just in like the experience, I think that's like one of the best ways in creating some brand loyalty. When someone has a great experience, whether it be at a sporting game, whether it be with your customer service team, or no matter what it is, I think that experience, it resonates with people a little deeper than just some of these like trendy touch points that they're seeing from other brands in their life. I think when they have something that they relate to or a personal experience that stands out, I think that creates like the biggest amount of brand loyalty for people. I think from a standpoint of like a small retail business, that magical experience comes from our sales floor team. So they're not in there to push product, to sell you a specific thing because it's the most expensive shoe for what you're looking for. They're in there to uncover your needs, really understand, why did you come in today? Why did you choose RC Outfitters to buy your shoes from? What can we help you with? I think that magical experience, it brings people back in, because when you go to box stores like Dick's, you get a team member that can bring the shoes out to you, and they're probably really nice, but they're not necessarily uncovering those needs. They're not expert about the product. They're able to tell you a few things, but they're not able to be a solution center for some of the customers, like a specialty run store can be. I think on the other side of that, when you look at a sporting event such as the Steamboat Classic in Peoria, I think that the experience that people get and the pride that the community takes in Peoria is such a big part in creating loyalty. We have, last year we did a spotlight on someone who has ran every single year of the Steamboat Classic, and I think that that's a really important part of history that makes people really proud to be a part of an experience such as a Steamboat Classic that has such rich history in the community. And I think that kind of like touching on that history and allowing some of the younger consumers to really understand what they're becoming a part of and that experience that they're adding to is a really big part in creating some loyal customers.
May I add to Isabel's point about understanding your consumer? I think that is so powerful across businesses. And I have a question for the group. I have nothing to give away if you answer this correctly. But I think this is amazing. So how many of you use Duolingo, like either to learn a language? Yeah. Okay. Do you know when you use Duolingo and it says, I can't speak right now, or I can't listen right now? You know that function that comes up? Why would they have that?
Easy convenience if you can't. You just speak or listen right now.
Yes, exactly. What? Because you're using it in class or you're at work, right? If I'm at my desk at work and suddenly someone hears like Yo Tango, whatever, right? Like people are going to be like, why is Katie practicing her Spanish, right? So they know that their users are doing it in class at their desk, right? So they added that feature in order for you to continue to use the product while recognizing the context. And I think that's so powerful. And when you use the word uncover, when you can uncover those tendencies, that's when you really get somebody. So I thought it was a super strong point, and it reminded me of my Spanish.
Well, that's actually the perfect segue, Isabel, to our last question before we turn it over to the audience. You've all touched today on how important community is and the specific location of your brands or your teams. So I'm curious, why is it so important to be truly connected to the community, and how do you connect to the community, whether it be nonprofits or corporate partnerships, in a way that enhances your brand while also reaching new consumers?
So I can start. So I think that one way that we have strongly been able to kind of mend that relationship of a corporate business while also bringing it to the Peoria community, I think is by our run club. So we have all of our vendor partners in the store, such as your big shoe brands that everyone might know, even to partners such as Lululemon, Viore, Free People Movement, etc. I think that our vendor relationship with those brands is really important, and creating that brand image in the community. So a way that we kind of like foster these relationships would be in our run club, we will invite vendors to come and bring demos of their shoes. And when they do that, all of the people that come to the run club, they get to try the shoes out, they get to give feedback, and their feedback is listened to. everyone on our team that is doing shoe fits, they're listening to what people are saying about a shoe. If a new shoe, is making, when somebody stands up, it's making them rock back a lot, that's something that, if the next customer comes in and they're like, I'm really struggling with being able to, stand and be stable, they're not going to bring that shoe out. So I think that when you're looking at some of these vendor relationships and what they're doing at our run club and the triangulation of what that means for the store and what it means for the customer, I think it really mends that relationship between a corporate and a community-based business such as us. I think on the flip side, we see on the side of like Steamboat Classic, we work with a lot of the non-for-profits in the community. So we're working this year, our cause for celebration is the triumphs of athletes with disabilities. So that's a really big push in marketing that we're doing this year, is really showcasing to our community, like, we're listening and we want to showcase these amazing athletes. So one of the marketing campaigns that we're doing is a year-long, every single week we are highlighting either a national or a local athlete with a disability and showcasing to our community, look, we have a really big base for this and that this is something that should be celebrated. Last year, the winner of the wheelchair race, she went on to win the Chicago and the New York Marathon, I believe. So I think showcasing, those relationships and being able to work with groups like Easter Seals and Prairie Land Adaptive, and really being able to create those relationships and bring adaptability sports into an iconic race such as the Steamboat Classic and make it really accessible for everyone is a great way to showcase partnerships in the community.
I'll probably take it in two different paths, but I think from a community perspective, players are going to come and go in any sports organization, and it's the community and your fans that are always going to be there. So you have to create that brand affinity. And at the end of the day, especially in an economic situation like we're currently in, people have a finite amount of money that they can spend on entertainment. And like we were just talking about in this first panel, it's like you could spend $900 to be able to do all the streaming that you would need to do to get every sporting event across the entire world. Well, how do we get part of that money, whether it's buying Apple TV to watch us, or whether it's buying a sweatshirt at the store, or whether it's coming to a match and having a great time. So for us, we need to understand where our fans are and where our community is, and to prove and promote the fact that they are very important to us and they are part of FC Cincinnati. They are actually FC Cincinnati, because at some point Nick Hagelin is going to retire. It's a fact of the world. At some point, Evander is no longer going to be on our team. It's just a fact. And the same can be said for every sport across every platform. From a corporate partner perspective, it's always finding somebody who's a fit for us. And we're not going to go out and get a company that feels completely different about something than us. We're not going to go out and find something that just doesn't fit our brand. And then the interesting and important thing is I talked about resources being limited previously. Being able to go out and not let a partner dictate what your content is, versus telling a partner, here are the pieces of content we can provide that you can be a part of, or you can logo slap on, or you can do something else with, is the most important thing and one of the hardest things to do. Because when you go to a corporate partner and they want to give you $500,000 and you say, no, we don't want to do this kind of content piece, we want to do this kind of content piece because this is what we want to do. And they say, well, we might not, then we will knock it down to $400,000, or we're not going to do the deal at all. That's a lot of pressure on a lot of people. And you have to have leadership that's willing to support you, or you need to find a way that you can come to maybe a meet in the middle. So that is a lot, like I said, that's a lot of pressure on a lot of people to be able to deliver, because you've got pressure on the salespeople who are sitting there going, oh my God, I need this $500,000 deal. But then you've got all the people on the content side who are sitting here going, I don't want to do a piece where we send somebody into a Goodwill store and find an FC Cincinnati shirt. Like that was literally something that came up in one of the brainstorms from our group. And I love Goodwill. I've donated to Goodwill. I've bought stuff at Goodwill. But from a brand perspective, what does that look like that someone's going to go into a Goodwill store and find an FC Cincinnati shirt? Does that mean they're not a fan anymore? Does that mean they're disposing? So it's not, when I left Penn State, I donated a whole lot of Penn State shirts. I had 20 years worth of Penn State gear, and I donated a whole lot of them to Goodwill. That doesn't mean that Penn State stinks, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't end up at Goodwill, but is that how you want to present your brand, is that it's a Goodwill find? So those are the things that you have to think about when you get into corporate partnerships and stuff like that.
Both of those answers were excellent. I have no notes.
All right. On that note, we are going to turn it over to our audience now. And so while we have, the next 30 minutes before lunch, I'm opening the floor to questions. Yep, over here first. And Peyton's going to come around with a microphone for you so we can all hear.
So previously you mentioned Cincinnati doing the Seven Hills jerseys or kits. Do you think having to explain what the Seven Hills are and what they mean is kind of forcing the brand instead of naturally having the brand to occur like a lot of soccer teams have, especially in Europe? Do you think it's kind of forcing the brand, and do you think that's a good thing to do?
First off, I saw your jacket. Shout out Rush Henrietta. I'm from Greece. So, but I understand where you're coming from, and it's not necessarily forcing the brand as much as it's telling the story of how we created it, and making the community feel like they're part of it. And so it's not necessarily, it's weird. And again, I've been in Cincinnati for like 3.5 months. I didn't know Seven Hills was like a thing. If you're from Cincinnati or you're in Cincinnati, you know that it's a thing. So you're not necessarily forcing the brand on it because, like I said, we're all for Cincy. And so we're just uncovering and utilizing the pieces of Cincinnati history to make it part of our story. And giving, like I said, giving a little bit of a nod and an ode to the history of Cincinnati, which is so important to us. So I don't know that it's necessarily a force, but way too like in the weeds. Like Adidas makes us, but when we go to make a kit, they make us tell them a story about how we got to the kit design. So like the St. Louis team this year, they have a Tina Turner kit because Tina Turner is from St. Louis, and so it's gold and it's about gold records and all that kind of stuff. So some of it is that we are a little bit forced to tell a story of how we're designing this kit, and then we just bring it to life on the back end.
Next question? Oh.
What made you guys want to do branding and stuff?
I can answer this. So when I was in college, I actually started out as a psychology major. I thought I was going to go into the medical field. I, halfway through my first semester, realized that wasn't necessarily the path that I was meant to be on. And I found that my passion wasn't necessarily in the medical field. And it was kind of hard because that was kind of the path I had for myself all through high school. But I always had this side hobby of, graphic design and, creating brands. I had always done, creative things like that. So I had talked to, my parents were big people that helped me, shape what exactly I wanted to do. And then also some of the mentors at U of I helped me pick advertising. I thought I was going to do full graphic design, but as I went through a lot of the classes and I got to take some of the capstone classes my senior year, and I really got to work with brands and help create that branding strategy for them, I realized that was something that I was really passionate about and somewhere that I felt like I could be really strong as a professional in marketing.
Nice.
I started as a comms person, and just as the years went on. Like I said, I was a stats nerd, writing game notes and press releases and dealing with the website. And as my career continued to go down the path, the brand piece and the content building all became part of that. So I don't know that I was like, yes, I want to go into brand building. But it becomes an essential part of your job in any way, shape, or form in any organization.
Thanks for the question. I studied history at Northwestern, so I wrote papers on the fall of the Roman Empire and the Negro Leagues. And so people say to me, how do you have a job at all, let alone a job in baseball? But I do think there is a strong case for the liberal arts. So I knew I wanted to work in baseball. My godfather was the bullpen coach of the Twins for 32 years. And he's the reason that I wore number 43 when I was with the Red Sox. And he used to say to me, those damn spreadsheets are ruining baseball, which is kind of ironic because now I help put together those damn spreadsheets. But I think from a branding perspective, and Isabel said it really early on, like that storytelling component, if I'm sitting next to a player, I think there are a lot of coaches and a lot of analysts who like to hear themselves speak. And I think the best coaches and the best analysts are able to distill a message and customize it. So if I'm working with a player and I know all that he wants to know when a new reliever comes in out of the bullpen is max fastball velocity, that was the case with Hudson Potts when I worked with him, and it was up to 95 miles an hour, I would just flash a 5. In that moment, I don't need to talk about vertical approach angle. I don't need to talk about seam effects on the pitcher's sinker. All Hudson Potts wants to know is 95 miles an hour. And so being able to individualize that information, and here's the story that he needs in this moment, I think that's probably the best thing that you can do in the way that you can really help players get better.
Thanks. We have a hand over here, Molly. Microphone's on its way.
All right, cool. I just want to say thank you, first of all. It was really cool to come in and see 4 women up on the panel talking about sports and talking about sports marketing and everything. And I was wondering how how you take gender into account when marketing for sports. Like, do women and men interact with sports differently? And do you take that into account when you're doing this marketing?
I think women and men definitely approach sports differently. And I do appreciate the question. When you're from an MLS perspective, it's like I said, we're doing some brand work, and it's kind of interesting. We're doing like 30 hour-long conversations with different types of fans, and a large percentage of them actually are women, which I think is very interesting because you typically are just like, oh, sports equals guys. When it comes to like MLS and it comes to FC Cincinnati and particularly, a lot of times it's actually the women who are making the decision. The women are wanting to take their families to the game, or a mom wants to connect with her 12-year-old son who plays soccer, and this is a great way for her to do that. So I think it's understanding, are you going after the guy who played high school soccer, maybe played college soccer, and he wants to relive his glory days by going to a soccer game? Or are you trying to hit that family, get that 12-year-old who's a fan for life now? And so that's, for us, is just figuring out the right balance of that, because you can't go all like sappy mom and then you lose all the guys and the coolness factor of the guys. But overwhelmingly, we feel like a lot of times when it is families, that the female is kind of the one that's making those decisions of how to spend the time and the money that they're doing family things with. But like the one lady we talked to, she wanted to connect with her son, and her husband is a Bengals fan, but doesn't really care about soccer. Now he comes to soccer games with them, but like we would have never connected with that family without the mom. And so that's where I think women don't always get enough credit in the sporting world of how much fandom they have. I'm as big of a fan as any guy for the teams that I root for. You know, the Buffalo Sabres have played 70-something odd games this year, and I've probably watched 70 of them on ESPN Plus. You know, so like those are the things that we need to understand, is that there are women that can have just as much impact on sports as men. Because they're also, by the way, they're buying the back-to-school clothes for their kids, too. They're doing all of the things that you don't think about.
Over here, Peyton.
Hello, also for Chris Peterson again. The current competition of MLS in the United States for soccer specifically is USL. USL is currently growing, and they're adding promotion and relegation after the World Cup. How do you believe MLS should react to kind of counter their growth after the World Cup happens? Because I think USL is going to get a bit of a spark after they add promotion, relegation, and add a third division to their pyramid.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I think the change in the MLS calendar is going to be what counteracts that in a lot of ways. Granted, you're not. What would have been a perfect scenario if the MLS really had their stuff together was that the portion of the season we're currently playing is the sprint season that we would have next year at this time. So that coming out of the World Cup break, you're starting a brand new MLS season, and now you're on the global calendar with everybody else. They couldn't get their stuff together to make that happen, so now we're doing that a year from now, and you're just hoping that you're still going to have that bounce from the World Cup. And then the good news for you is that you're going to have a bounce from the Olympics in a year after that in 2028 because it's in America, it's in LA. So you're in a really great sweet spot as soccer as a whole, whether it be MLS or USL, where you're going to have a bounce in 2 out of 3 years, and it's taking advantage of that, and I think that the calendar flip will help that. From a relegation promotion perspective, the casual soccer fan in America doesn't understand that. They don't get it, and so it doesn't necessarily. If they understand it, it might be because they watch Ted Lasso. That's the only reason. Because they're like, oh, Ted Lasso's team, they got relegated, that's terrible. But they don't understand it as a casual soccer fan. Obviously, you're obviously a soccer person, and that is important to you, and you understand that, and you see that as a game changer. The casual soccer fan does not. And so we were talking last night, the thing for a casual soccer fan is these mid-season tournaments, CONCACAF, Leagues Cup, Open Cup. I don't know how many people in this room even know what the heck I just talked about with those 3 things. They literally are tournaments that happen in the middle of the season, and you kind of put the MLS season on pause, or you play those games in the midst of MLS games. That's very confusing for someone who's not a soccer person. And I will admit that until January, I wasn't in depth in soccer. I didn't know what all of those things. I didn't know what those things were, but I didn't fully understand what those things were. So I think in some ways, Americanizing MLS is where we're going to get some bumps, and figuring out how to reach people, and whether it be eventually getting off of Apple, but you're with Apple till 2030, so you got to figure it out and make it happen. So.
What other questions do we have? Over here, Peyton, in the front.
Hi, so this is kind of a question for all 3 of you. So all of you guys kind of market for completely different brands and also brand sizes. How do you kind of navigate that when the market consistently just demands kind of those larger scale productions? If someone comes in and asks you to make a $10 million video on a $500 budget, kind of how do you navigate that?
I think from a small business standpoint, I think our vendors are very understanding in what our capabilities are versus what their spend behind certain asks might be, like what you're referring to. So I think that for us, a lot of the vendor marketing partnerships that I facilitate, they will pay the ad spend. They will do these things because it is a partnership back and forth. So I think that with the example you used of, we are a smaller business. So I think just making sure that in all of our partnerships that there's a mutual understanding of their capabilities, our capabilities, and just making sure that everything always meshes together and that we're doing the, best we can to showcase what we're doing in the community.
Totally agree with that. The other argument I would make is that if they're wanting a $10 million video and then maybe you're not the right partner for us. And that goes back to the evaluating that we talked about earlier is we're not LA, we're not Miami. So it's knowing yourself when you're having these conversations and partnerships.
What other questions do we have? Oh, Mike over there.
Just getting her steps in.
She's on the golf team. She's used to it.
Oh, nice. Peyton, what's your handicap?
It's 1.6 right now.
That a girl.
Nice.
All right, so this is a question for Katie. So I'm a sports communications student here, but I'm also double minoring in finance and accounting, and I saw that you teach us a class on sports finance and front office operations. How would you say is the best way for a student like me to get into an industry like that?
Within like the sports media realm or
Like-
more on the finance side?
More the financial side.
Great question. I actually have an assignment in my class on CONCAF and like budgeting for that event, so I am familiar with it.
It's a lot of lost money.
All the students are like, approve it, do it. I'm like, have you thought about this? So on the finance side, it's a really good question. I think most people don't realize that a front office is a binary between the business operations and the sports operations. So if I work in player development, scouting, R&D from like an acquisition perspective, that's baseball operations. If I work in ticket sales, marketing, corporate sponsorship, finance, that's on the business side. And so at Northwestern, the class that I inherited, the sports finance class, was from the CFO of the Bulls, who now has the same role at the Mavs. And he says all the time, we're basically a food and beverage business, right? Like what he can control is how much beer do we sell, how many hot dogs, and how many people can we get to the United Center. Like what the Bulls do or don't do on the court, like that's, again, the basketball operations side. So I would say from a hiring perspective, both realms are super competitive. The sports operations a little bit more so because there's just like a sex appeal with being able to decide who's on the roster. I think it's really important to network and to have somebody pull you from the resume pile, right? When I oversaw hiring in Cincinnati, when I worked for the Reds, we had 1,000 applications for 3 spots. For internships, right? 1,000 applications for 3 spots. And so the numbers are against you, but if you have someone who's willing to go to bat for you just to get your resume looked at, right? Like let's say I really want to work for FC Cincinnati and I built a rapport with Chris. If and when a job then gets posted, let's say it's for an assistant director of analytics, at that moment I would leverage the relationship that I have with Chris and say, hey Chris, just applied for this job. Do you know the hiring manager? Or would you be willing to connect me with someone, right? If I just apply, I will never get looked at. And I think it's a harsh reality, but if you're a team, there are so many applications, and the person who gets chosen, like the delta between who gets chosen and the next best person, it's not a lot, you know? So if you can have someone who can advocate on your behalf, it's really beneficial, and it takes time to network. You know, it's not something that's just done overnight, but that would be my advice. And then you can hire me someday. Deal?
I do agree, like, going back to what skills do you need to have, being at these kinds of things, these are important things. Starting networking. And the important part about networking isn't necessarily just go around and glad hand and talk to the 3 of us here in this moment and then never talk to us again until that job opens up and you're like, hey, Pete, can you give me that job?
I love that panel you were on.
I love that panel. You remember that panel 7 years ago that you were on? Can you help me out? So it's having those relationships and continuing those relationships. I know Malcolm Moran is on this next panel, and Malcolm and I go back to my days at the Mid-Continent Conference, and you know, that's a relationship that I have continued to have amongst other, you know, many other people. But sometimes it's like, hey, Malcolm, I just applied for a job at such and such place. Do you know anybody? And sometimes it's just, hey, Malcolm, guess what? We're both going to be in Peoria on Thursday. Like, can't wait to see you. But I do think that networking should not be overlooked in any way, shape, or form, especially at your age, but even as you continue through.
What other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so when branding, how do you guys approach marketing trends when they can be seen as controversial?
Yeah, that's probably a good question. The thing is sometimes I think it depends on who you work for. For, like I said earlier, like FC Cincinnati and Penn State before this, very, very conservative. So for us, we would more than likely decline or not participate in something that's maybe a little more trendy or overreaching or doesn't feel like us versus jumping 2 feet in on something that's a little bit controversial. You know, going back to Katie's point about like Sephora, the number of conversations that I have been part of, whether it be Black Lives Matter or COVID or just LGBTQ, Pride Days, all, like, you name it, if it's a social issue, like trans sports, obviously, like working at a college athletics, like that was a big thing for a number of years and is still a big thing. You need to kind of, most of the time as a company, play the middle of the road. And because the likelihood of alienating somebody who's now not going to participate in your brand or care about your brand is probably less than if you picked a side.
It's like that Michael Jordan line, Republicans buy sneakers too. Right. It's flippant, but it's true.
It is. It's very true. So it's like, if you know, I think just because the political, not to get political, but like the political sphere is so crazy right now that the number of, and it goes to your Sephora point, like the number of actors who are now making their political opinions out there is actually kind of crazy, because for so many, like literally the history of America, you never knew what most actors' political preferences were. And so now you have people who are going out there and saying that they're one side or the other, and now somebody might not go to their movie because they're a Republican or they're a Democrat or they're a whatever. So those are all the things that as a business you have to take, and a brand you have to take into consideration. Are you willing to go out there and say, I'm taking this stance, or I'm participating in this controversial thing, and I'm willing to take whatever happens with it? And most of the time, most businesses are like, nope, I'm just going to stay out of it.
Or like Disney did when Florida had like some pretty unsavory legislation, because so many of their cast members were part of the LGBTQ community, and they were like, no, this is actually something we will fall on the sword for.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's because that's Disney. Like that fits Disney's.
Right, it aligns with the brand.
Right, it aligns with their brand.
That was a good question. We probably, Harvey over here.
If we had swag, we'd give it to you.
We're out.
Yeah, so this can be a question for anyone, but Chris, you mentioned Buffalo earlier. With what the Bills have been doing in terms of their rich fan culture, whether that be the Bills Mafia, fans jumping through tables, fans clearing snow from their seats with their hands, etc. How much of that is fan culture influencing organizational branding versus the organization shaping the fan culture through smart branding? I'd love some insight on that.
Well, what I will say is, long before social media, all of those things happened in the world of the Bills, and nobody knew about it. You know, like they would put a big snowstorm, they'd put an ad out in the newspaper and say, hey, we need people to come out or get a spot on the TV station and say, hey, anybody who's available from 10 to 4, come shovel out the stands. Social media has completely changed all of that, that now it's not just the people in Buffalo or Rochester who see that, or Toronto. It's now everybody in the world who sees the crazy people jumping through tables and spraying themselves with ketchup and mustard. Listen, I didn't say we were like smart people. But it is the culture that has been created around that. Again, like I said, it's a mid-market group. And it is, having grown up in that area, like the affinity that they have for Buffalo as a city, and the sports teams, and the heartbreak that the sports teams, all of them, bring with it. There is like, it is, you're like, oh my God, you're a Bills fan, I'm a Bills fan, it doesn't matter. And the best part about being a Bills fan or a Sabres fan or just a fan of Buffalo sports is we'll welcome anybody. We don't care. Like, you can be to the conversation about switching sports affinities. Like, if you want to jump on the Sabres bandwagon or the Bills bandwagon, you know what? We warmed a seat up for you. Come on in. Where a lot of sports teams are like, nope, you're not a Bengal. Like, I had a conversation with some Bengals fans a couple weeks ago, and it was like they were mad that the year they went to the Super Bowl, all these people became bandwagon hoppers. So I think the culture is influenced by what happens socially on social media and content, but it was always there, and you've now just enhanced it and you've made people know about it, I think is what it boils down to.
Good question. We probably have time for one more.
Hi, Katie. This question is a little bit more geared towards you, but what were the most pivotal experiences that helped you break into high-level baseball operation roles?
Ooh, great question. I think a mantra that I try to live by is spend your life studying for pop quizzes. So I knew I wanted to work in baseball, and I knew that in order to get there, I had to consume it at a really high level and expose myself to a lot of different things. I think about, you know how Taylor Swift like reinvents herself all the time, right? Like she's a country singer, now she's a pop artist, now she's like Wag Jesus, right? Like she's all these different things. And like you're very intrigued by the way that she does that. And I think being able to do that professionally, I think it was Andy who said something earlier on the panel about being able to pivot. Like I've been a coach, I've been an analyst, I've worked at the league office, and I think having that utility player skill set allows me to empathize and be in a lot of different spaces. Like I can talk to the head of cybersecurity at MLB just as easily as I can talk to a pitching coach in the Dominican Republic. And I think being able to occupy those various spaces is something that I've been very intentional about, because I know that someday, when I get to the role that I want, I'll need to be able to occupy those spaces and get buy-in from people. Like I need that coach in the Dominican to believe in what we're trying to do, to believe that we can win a World Series, just like I need Neil Boland at MLB to ensure that our servers don't get hacked. Yeah.
Any final questions before we break? Well, thank you so much for all of the wonderful insights you gave us today. Chris and Isabel and Katie will be around for a while, so please catch them and talk to them, especially if you are a woman trying to break into the sports industry. Please, please, please find these people, and they can give you all sorts of wonderful advice.